Imagine growing up under an oppressive political regime, where every word you speak is scrutinized, and every action is monitored. Now, imagine standing up against that regime, armed only with your beliefs in nonviolence, truth, and human dignity. Could you do it? Václav Havel did. He was a man whose journey from playwright to dissident to the first president of the Czech Republic stands as a shining example of ethical leadership in modern history. Havel's story is not just one of political victory, it's one of moral strength, intellectual resilience, and spiritual depth. Throughout his life, he was guided by a broad array of philosophical influences, from existentialism to Western liberalism and humanism. But what often goes overlooked is the profound impact that Buddhist philosophy had on his thought, particularly its teachings on nonviolence, personal responsibility, and the power of truth. The more we explore these influences, the more we understand that Havel's legacy is about more than politics. It's about how we, as individuals, can live more ethical, responsible, and compassionate lives. In this essay, we'll journey through Havel's early life, his intellectual formation, the development of his philosophy, his pivotal role in the Velvet Revolution, and how Buddhist principles played a critical role in shaping his approach to governance and justice. Václav Havel's background and intellectual formation. Before we can understand how Buddhist philosophy shaped Havel's leadership, we need to take a step back and explore the world that shaped Havel himself. Born in 1936 in Prague, Havel grew up in a family that was intellectually vibrant but politically complicated. His family's wealth and status made them targets for the communist regime that rose to power in Czechoslovakia after World War II. Can you imagine living in such a paradox, raised with the privilege of culture and ideas, but oppressed by a system that sought to crush those very things? Havel's early life was marked by exposure to some of the greatest minds in European thought. His parents were well connected with artists, intellectuals, and political figures, and his childhood home was a hub for discussions about philosophy, literature, and society. These early experiences laid the groundwork for Havel's future intellectual and political life. But it wasn't until his teenage years that Havel began to form his own ideas about the world. He was deeply influenced by the rise of totalitarianism in Europe, first through Nazi fascism and later through communism, both of which tried to control not just the political, but the very intellectual and moral lives of their citizens. This oppressive atmosphere spurred Havel's interest in existentialism, a philosophy that grapples with the human condition, freedom, and responsibility. The writings of Franz Kafka, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus captivated him. In their works, Havel found a kind of mirror for his own experience under totalitarian rule. Like the characters in Kafka's novels, Havel lived in a world where the truth was distorted, where individuals were powerless against a faceless bureaucracy, and where the absurd became the norm. How could someone live authentically in such a world? This question would haunt Havel for years. As Havel matured, his intellectual journey expanded beyond existentialism. He began to explore broader ethical and philosophical traditions, including Eastern philosophies like Buddhism. But Havel's exploration of these ideas wasn't just academic, it was deeply personal. He was searching for a way to live in truth, a way to maintain his integrity in a society built on lies and coercion. It's no surprise, then, that Buddhism's teachings on nonviolence, personal responsibility, and the nature of truth resonated so deeply with him. The influence of Buddhist philosophy on Havel's thought. It might surprise some to learn that Václav Havel, a Western intellectual, steeped in the works of existentialist philosophers, was profoundly influenced by Buddhist philosophy. But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. At the heart of both existentialism and Buddhism is a concern with the nature of human freedom and the ethical responsibilities that come with it. Havel didn't formally study Buddhist texts, but he was familiar with its core ideas through his personal encounters and reading. Over the years, two key aspects of Buddhist philosophy stood out to him: the principle of ahimsa, nonviolence, and the concept of personal freedom tied to responsibility. Both of these ideas played a critical role in shaping Havel's approach to governance and his leadership in the Velvet Revolution. Ahimsa, nonviolence as political strategy, ahimsa, the principle of nonviolence, is a central tenet of Buddhist ethics. It teaches that violence, in any form, is a destructive force that perpetuates suffering. True liberation, according to Buddhist thought, can only come through peaceful means. This idea resonated deeply with Havel, especially as he found himself at the forefront of the Czechoslovak dissident movement in the 1970s and 1980s. Imagine being imprisoned for your beliefs, knowing that your government is watching your every move. How easy it would have been for Havel to become bitter, to advocate for violent resistance against the regime that oppressed him. But Havel, like the Buddhist thinkers he admired, knew that violence would only create more suffering. Instead, he chose the path of nonviolent resistance. In the 1970s, Havel became a leading figure in the Czechoslovak dissident movement, co-authoring the Charter 77 Manifesto, which called for the communist government to respect human rights. Despite numerous arrests and years spent in prison, Havel consistently advocated for nonviolent resistance against the government. Can you imagine the moral courage that must have taken? Havel's commitment to nonviolence culminated in his leadership during the Velvet Revolution of 1989. This peaceful uprising, driven by ordinary citizens, resulted in the collapse of communist rule in Czechoslovakia. What's truly remarkable is that this revolution, unlike so many others in history, was almost entirely bloodless. It was a moment in world history when nonviolence prevailed, and Havel's leadership was instrumental in ensuring that the revolution stayed peaceful. For Havel, nonviolence was not just a tactical decision, it was a moral imperative. He believed that violence could never bring about true justice or lasting peace. This conviction was deeply influenced by Buddhist philosophy, which teaches that violence is ultimately a manifestation of ignorance and suffering. Havel's speeches and writings from this period are filled with references to the transformative power of truth and nonviolence. He often emphasized that nonviolence was not a sign of weakness but a display of moral strength. It's a powerful reminder that peace is not passive, it requires active, courageous engagement with the world, personal freedom and responsibility, the individual's role in society. Another aspect of Buddhist philosophy that strongly influenced Havel was the idea that personal freedom is inseparable from responsibility toward others. In Buddhism, individual enlightenment and liberation from suffering come through self-awareness, ethical conduct, and compassion for all beings. Importantly, Buddhism does not promote individualism in the Western sense. Instead, it emphasizes interconnectedness and the idea that true freedom comes from recognizing one's duties to others and to society as a whole. Havel's writings reflect a similar belief that personal freedom cannot exist in isolation from responsibility. In his famous essay The Power of the Powerless, Havel described how totalitarian regimes thrive on people's willingness to live within a system of lies and falsehoods. He argued that true freedom comes from living in truth, a concept that echoes the Buddhist focus on mindfulness and moral integrity. For Havel, living in truth meant acting authentically and taking personal responsibility for one's actions, even in the face of external pressures. In this sense, Havel's vision of freedom was deeply ethical. He rejected both the oppressive control of authoritarianism and the selfishness of unchecked individualism. Like Buddhism, which teaches that enlightenment is a collective journey as much as an individual one, Havel believed that personal liberation must be tied to a commitment to social justice and the well-being of others. Isn't it beautiful how these philosophies come together? This is where Havel's thought departs from some Western conceptions of freedom, which often prioritize individual autonomy above all else. For Havel, freedom wasn't about doing whatever you wanted, it was about doing what was right, not just for yourself but for society as a whole. He believed that true freedom required individuals to take responsibility for their actions and for the world they lived in. This is a deeply Buddhist idea, the notion that we are all interconnected and that our actions have consequences for others. Havel's belief in personal responsibility was not just theoretical, it was deeply practical. As a political leader, he consistently emphasized the importance of ethical conduct. Not just for politicians but for all citizens. He believed that a healthy democracy depended on the moral integrity of its citizens, and he encouraged people to take responsibility for their own lives and for the well-being of their communities. Truth as a central ethical concept. At the heart of Havel's philosophy is the concept of truth, living in truth, as he called it. In a society filled with lies and propaganda, Havel believed that the most powerful act of resistance was simply to speak the truth. This idea resonates deeply with Buddhist teachings, which emphasize the importance of right understanding, samyak dai, and right speech, samyak vak. In Buddhist thought, ignorance, avidya, is the root of suffering, and only through the cultivation of wisdom and insight can individuals achieve liberation. Havel, too, believed that ignorance, deceit, and propaganda were the tools of totalitarian regimes, and that the antidote to such oppression was truth. For Havel, speaking the truth wasn't just a political act, it was a spiritual one. It required individuals to confront their own moral failings and to live authentically, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Havel's commitment to truth was tested repeatedly throughout his life. He spent years in prison for his refusal to conform to the communist regime's lies. Yet, despite the personal cost, Havel remained steadfast in his belief that truth was the foundation of any ethical society. In his view, truth had a transformative power. It could awaken individuals to their own responsibility and inspire them to take action against injustice. This idea of truth as a central ethical concept is one of the key ways in which Havel's philosophy aligns with Buddhist thought. In both traditions, truth is not just about facts or information, it's about seeing the world clearly and acting in accordance with that understanding. For Havel, living in truth meant rejecting the lies of the authoritarian system and striving to create a more just and compassionate society. The Velvet Revolution and Havel's role as a leader. Let's turn now to one of the most dramatic moments in Václav Havel's life, the Velvet Revolution of 1989. This was a time of immense change and uncertainty in Czechoslovakia. For years, the communist regime had maintained its grip on power through repression and fear. But in 1989, something extraordinary happened. The people of Czechoslovakia, inspired by a growing global movement for democracy, began to demand change. And Havel, through his writing, his speeches, and his leadership, became the voice of that movement. The Velvet Revolution was a peaceful uprising of citizens demanding political change. Remarkably, it was a revolution without violence, a testament to Havel's commitment to non-violence and his belief in the power of truth. Isn't it awe-inspiring to think that an entire regime could be toppled without bloodshed? Havel's leadership during this period was marked by a deep sense of responsibility, not just to the people of Czechoslovakia but to the principles of justice and non-violence that he had spent his life defending. He knew that the revolution would not be truly successful if it replaced one form of violence with another. Instead, he believed that the new government had to be built on a foundation of truth, compassion, and respect for human dignity. During the revolution, Havel's speeches resonated with the people because they spoke to something deeper than just political change. They spoke to the human spirit's desire for freedom and justice. Havel didn't just call for the overthrow of the communist regime, he called for a moral and spiritual awakening. He urged people to reject the lies they had been living under and to embrace a new way of being, one that was rooted in truth, non-violence, and responsibility. This is where Havel's leadership shines as a truly ethical form of leadership. He didn't see himself as a politician in the traditional sense. He saw himself as a moral guide, someone who could help lead his people not just to political freedom but to a deeper kind of liberation. Isn't that the kind of leadership we all long for, building a just and democratic society? After the Velvet Revolution, Václav Havel became the first president of the newly formed Czech Republic. But Havel didn't just want to create a democracy in name, he wanted to build a society that was truly just, compassionate, and grounded in ethical principles. His vision for a democratic society was deeply influenced by the principles of Buddhism, particularly its emphasis on compassion, personal responsibility, and the interconnectedness of all beings. For Havel, democracy wasn't just about elections or political institutions, it was about creating a moral community where people cared for one another and took responsibility for the common good. This is a vision of democracy that is sorely lacking in much of the world today, don't you think? Havel believed that a just society could only be built on a foundation of truth, nonviolence, and compassion. He often spoke about the importance of dialogue and mutual respect, values that are central to Buddhist teachings. In Buddhism, right speech, samyak vak, is about speaking in a way that promotes harmony and understanding, and Havel believed that the health of a democracy depended on the ability of its citizens to engage in thoughtful, respectful dialogue. But Havel's vision of democracy wasn't just about abstract principles, it was deeply practical. As president, he worked to promote human rights, social justice, and the rule of law. He understood that democracy is fragile and that it requires constant vigilance and care. He often warned against the dangers of complacency, urging people to stay engaged and to take responsibility for their society. This idea of responsibility is central to Havel's vision of democracy. Like Buddhism, which teaches that individual enlightenment is inseparable from compassion for others, Havel believed that personal freedom could only exist in a society where people cared for one another and worked for the common good. Isn't it refreshing to hear a political leader speak about ethics and responsibility in this way? Conclusion: Václav Havel's ethical legacy. In the end, Václav Havel's life and work stand as a testament to the power of ethical leadership. His unwavering commitment to truth, nonviolence, and personal responsibility continues to inspire people around the world. Havel showed us that politics doesn't have to be about power and self-interest, it can be about values, ethics, and the common good. Havel's legacy is one of moral courage and intellectual leadership. He demonstrated that philosophy and spirituality can be powerful tools for political change, and his example continues to inspire those who seek to build more just, compassionate, and democratic societies. By integrating Buddhist principles into his political philosophy, Havel showed that ethical leadership requires not only strategic thinking but also a deep commitment to the values of peace, truth, and human dignity. So, what can we learn from Václav Havel's life? Perhaps the most important lesson is that each of us has the power to make a difference, not just in the political realm, but in our daily lives. By living in truth, by practicing nonviolence, and by taking responsibility for our actions and for the world around us, we can help create a more just and compassionate society. Havel's journey wasn't easy. He faced imprisonment, persecution, and immense personal sacrifice. But through it all, he remained steadfast in his beliefs. His life reminds us that true leadership isn't about seeking power for its own sake, it's about serving others, standing up for what's right, and never losing sight of our shared humanity. Isn't that the kind of world we all want to live in? A world where truth, compassion, and responsibility guide our actions, and where we work together to build a just and democratic society for all? Václav Havel's legacy shows us that it's possible, and that it's up to each of us to make it a reality.